Good morning, everyone. I'm meteorologist Joe Cioffi here. It's Tuesday, September the 4th, coming up on 9:20 a.m. I know I scheduled it for 9:30, but I got everything I needed to get to done. So I figured I'd jump on early. I'm going to update this morning. We're going to take a look at Tropical Storm Gordon, which continues to move toward the west-northwest. We weren't really overly enthused with the strengthening profile of the system as it moved through the eastern Gulf of Mexico. Conditions were favorable, but they weren't exactly ideal. And I know a few people were saying, pointing out the fear of rapid strengthening. It really wasn't there. I mean, so far it hasn't been anyway. And I'm just looking at the latest recon. Doesn't look like we're seeing any signs of rapid strengthening. And they're starting to run out of time here because landfall is probably going to be in about 18 hours or so. It could still possibly reach minimal hurricane status. Top winds at the moment are 60 to 65 miles an hour, so it only needs to get to about 75. But we're not seeing, at least so far, not seeing any pressure falls that would indicate that we're on our way to that. Sebastian P. Was first on board. LeBron fan was second. Stephen Franco, good to see you here. You show came in for show. David R. Rounds out the superfecta, and Delvin 4519 rounds out the super high five. Welcome aboard. Still got horse racing on my mind, even though Saratoga has come to a close, and they'll be back at Belmont at the end of this week. Okay, so why don't we take a look at what's happening here? We're going to start off with the satellite loop, and then I'm going to get rid of it in case it decides to interfere with my signal. There's a problem, apparently, by the way, with some of the GOES loops that are on the Hurricane Center's page. If you load them if you bring them up on your browser, they tend to stall out, and they do something where it just briefly cuts off the network connection, which is one of the reasons why I was having issues here last week trying to broadcast live. But anyhow, you can see it in the Eastern Gulf. It's not the biggest system in the world, folks. It's actually on the smallish side and remains that way. There is there's a weak lead rain band that has moved onshore in some places or just offshore. But most of the activity is still to the east. It looks like a fairly decent chunk of rain may wind up going into the Florida Panhandle out of this, with the system sort of tilted to the east side. You can also see from the flow of clouds from Louisiana westward, you're still getting winds, basically upper air winds from the north, blowing from north to south there. So there is some shear going on. In a little bit of shear anyway, and that may be a bit of a limiting factor with regards to strengthening. And again, we're starting to get this a little bit closer to land, which is going to be obviously the most important issue. Now, we have a reconnaissance aircraft in there right now. The pressure is at 1,005 millibars. It's on its second pass. It looks like the track is still on the a west-northwest or northwest course there, moving right along. The center plot as of 9:23 Eastern time is roughly at about 28.3 and 86 and a half. So you're not talking about a whole lot of distance from here on up to the northwest. By the way, that tone you may have just heard, that was my oven singing. I've got some prepping my dinner in the oven, and it's just telling me that it's reached the prime temperature. Okay, as we were saying, there's not a whole lot of distance going on from where the center plot is now to landfall along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And by the way, a lot of the Air Force reconnaissance aircraft, they fly them out of Biloxi, so this was a relatively short trip for them to get to from there to where the center is. Looks like we've got some 50 to 55 knot winds on the east side, and some gales on the northwest side, but nothing particularly impressive. So we'll see what it finds on the outbound leg here. It's probably going to make the recon's probably going to make a third pass as it goes down and around one more time. So we will watch to see if we watch this to see if we get any kind of pressure falls today. So far, we certainly haven't seen much overnight and through this morning. We'll jump before we come to the forecast, Jack. Let me just we'll go to the radars. We'll start first with the Southeast Regional Radar, and there is rain now beginning to come onshore on the Florida Panhandle, and also a little bit of rain that's moving into extreme southeastern Louisiana, down around Boothville and south of New Orleans. I saw New Orleans did have a little bit of light rain earlier. There were just a couple of little few small showers there that moved on through. What you're seeing in along southwest Louisiana, southeast Texas, there is not related to Gordon, but that's related to everything that's going on back through Texas with the trough, and that is in West Texas. The local radars at this point, going first to, we'll go to the Baton Rouge, Louisiana radar, and here's the band. Again, this is as of coming up on 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. So if you're watching this on a replay, please be advised that the radars are obviously dated, so you're going to want to check your local radars. You can go to the National Weather Service homepage, weather.gov, and look on the geography, click over southeastern Louisiana, and you'll get to the local office here. The Mobile Loop, taking a look at it here, a couple of bands there, just south of Mobile Bay and south of Pensacola, and they're moving back toward the west northwest or northwest. But at the moment, there really isn't much going on on land. So with respect to the Hurricane Center's track, and this goes to my other issue. Remember, folks. You should not use any of the weather model maps that we show. You should not use those maps to make decisions. You should consult your local National Weather Service forecast office if you're inside the hurricane warning area, or go to the National Hurricane Center website at nhc.noaa.gov to get the official weather information. The warnings in the purplish area, you've got tropical storm watches in the pinkish area and blue. Covering southeastern tropical storm warnings for the areas in southeastern Louisiana and also along the Florida Gulf Coast, just west of just to the east of the Alabama border, with the hurricane warnings that are up as you go into western Alabama, the coastline, and the Mississippi coast. On the current forecast track, you're looking from the Hurricane Center for landfall sometime after 2 a.m., but before 8 a.m. So let's say at around 4 or 5 a.m. Near somewhere near Gulfport or Biloxi. I don't, judging from the structure of this, unless if we don't wind up seeing the system tilt a bit more to the west side, I'm just kind of openingly questioning how much rain is going to occur west of where the center falls. I think rainfall amounts, for example, in southeastern Louisiana, could wind up being a bit tempered, perhaps under a couple of inches, and the further west you go, even less. While the rainfall amounts, perhaps along and north and east of the track, that's where you could probably wind up seeing a band of 3, 4, 5, or 6 inches of rain. The good news is, by the way, from the standpoint of rain, is that this system is forecast to just continue moving right along. So it's not like it's going to stall out when it goes inland. This is not Harvey all over again. I know it's sort of a natural tendency to kind of jump to the comparisons of one storm to another. But the reality is that you don't see repeat performances very often, and when you do see them, they often occur years apart. It's just that I think what winds up happening is, and I saw it here, and you see it down south, you see it in this area. that's involved today. The the scarring that remains from Hurricane Katrina is still, obviously, it's a very open wound. In my area, it's Hurricane Sandy. It remains a very open wound. So there's a natural tendency for folks to just sort of go there and remember what caused it. And also, a lot of that is after years of disbelief of what the impact could be from a hurricane or a strong tropical storm, and then suddenly to have it visualize as reality, it remains a scar. So I understand it's a natural way to thing to do, but not all systems are the same, and that's why you have to kind of look at these things on an individual basis. This is in terms of what we're seeing right now, I don't see this becoming a huge, widespread, major problem. You folks along the Gulf Coast have managed these, storms like this before. I suspect that that will be the case again. At the same time, we want to be a little bit careful as it approaches the coast in case there are some major changes. But at the moment, everything seems to be playing along according to plan. We're not seeing any huge surprises. With respect to the weather models, and here's where again we're not getting signals from any of the models of something that's going to really get overly wrapped up. The GFS does bring the pressures down a bit by landfall to about 1,003, 1,002. That's really not that far from where it is at the moment. Maybe it'll get a bit lower than that, but then it's inland and done, and moving on to the continuing to move on to the northwest. And with respect to the rainfall that the GFS is showing from total accumulated precip here, and by the way, the map's always courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com, and we thank them for letting us share them and share them with you. There's the GFS model rainfall max. So this kind of lines up with what I said, that there's going to be a stripe of probably 3 to 6 inches of rain along and northeast of the track of Gordon as it moves inland. All of this, by the way, when we look at the upper air, this is just basically moving around the periphery of the ridge that's in the eastern part of the United States. And you can see that the ridge here is well up into Virginia and off the Virginia coast. There isn't a whole lot of flow when it comes to looking at areas across the Gulf states. A really strong upper flow, but there is enough of an upper flow here, at least, to move weather systems along. So that is that's a good thing, because we don't want this to stall out. All right, why don't we just really fast? I'm just going to really quickly take a look at what's happening longer term with respect to the upper air, because this is all going to play out with regards to Tropical Storm Florence, which continues to remain out there, and we are still probably no closer to resolving this. In fact, there's been kind of a model flip overnight. Suddenly, the GFS has decided that this may be a closer threat to the East Coast going into next week, and the European, which all along has been the furthest west, has now decided no, it's going to get caught by the trough that's moving up off the East Coast. This is the upper air that we're looking at. And suddenly we've got the GFS trying to develop a ridge early next week out in the Atlantic from just offshore. But you do see that there's troughing from the Great Lakes down into the Tennessee Valley, and that trough just kind of flattens out. And the GFS wants to rotate Florence around that upper ridge and bring it relatively close. I mean, it actually does bring it almost, but not quite, to 70 west. I think this is probably the furthest west of the recent runs of the GFS. Nothing's really changed in terms of how we're looking at the upper air. We're still trying to decipher, is the model, how are the models handling the strength of the ridge of the Atlantic and the troughing that wants to develop back across the Great Lakes. That is still the big issue. we can look at the suddenly what's changed on the European, and here we go. So when we look at the European, and it's this is the it doesn't have an upper air that matches up exactly. So I'm just going to switch over to the usual upper air that I use. And there's the flow across southeastern Canada for late this week and this weekend. When you get that trough that moves off the Canadian Maritimes, it extends pretty far to the south on this run. See, and that's the primary difference now. The European has suddenly decided that that trough is going to be more important and dig down. And what happens? It winds up picking Florence up and lifting it out to the northeast. It doesn't, the ridge off the east coast does build, but it doesn't matter if you wind up seeing this being taken out. So that's the primary difference now. The European has decided that that trough in the east, at least on last night's run. Now let's wait and see what the dayside model runs, what they do, because this, we don't know if that's a flip, and maybe it'll go back to what it had yesterday, which was basically shoving this along to the west until further notice. And one run model flips are not uncommon. The thing I would just emphasize the fact that nothing's really changed in terms of what the meteorology is and in terms of what our perspective is. We are still, it's still the same things that we were looking at yesterday, the shortwave energy that's moving through Canada, the strength of the ridge in the Atlantic. Those are still going to be keys, and I don't think we're close yet to coming to a confident solution on this. And by the way, we still have, if you notice, the European still basically has kind of a parade of tropical systems going forward through the weekend and into next week. So it looks like we're going to be dealing with several more systems. And the Hurricane Center is actually with a tropical wave that is now off the African coast and moving actually south of the Cabo de Verde Islands. That would be this system here. This is the forecast for the European for tomorrow night, closing off a small 1,009 millibar low. So the Hurricane Center is now, has raised the probability of that developing into a tropical depression or a tropical storm in its 5-day period, I believe to 70%, if I remember correctly. So that pretty much kind of sums it up what's going on here. Again, with respect to Gordon, it's holding its own. We're not seeing any signs of additional strengthening. Still some time for it to put some strength in there, but I'm not overly bullish on the idea. And I'm not seeing anything, at least so far this morning, that would indicate that that's the direction at which we're going. Collective good morning to those of you who joined after I got started. Good to see everybody here. Christopher, Christina Lindeen, good morning to you. Christopher says, so far looks like intensity remains steady on Gordon. It will be dangerous, either strong tropical storm or hurricane. It's going to do what it's going to do, pretty much. Yes. And could achieve minimal hurricane status. You notice, it's kind of again on the smaller side. So in terms of its in the geographic impact of this, it's going to be on the small side. Of course, that is small consolation if you happen to be inside that area. But there are some things here that would suggest that this system is going to move along. We'll get through what you'll get through what you get through, and then. Watching on the train on the way in on the Long Island Railroad. Share, big audience available. We could use some rain from the remnants of Gordon being it so hot and dry. Well, we are going to get here in the Northeast for Saturday, and this front that's coming through here on Thursday is going to stall out to the south, and low pressure is going to come out of the southern plains because you do have that trough that's going to be swinging across the Great Lakes. And that will generate a surface low. It's going to pick up the remnants of Gordon and bring them up into the Northeast. I don't know how much impact how much additional impact it's going to have on whatever rain it produces here. But I think we're going to get some rain this weekend coming up, particularly Saturday night and Sunday. David R. These computers know about as much as I do, which ain't much. Which ain't much. Well, that may very well be, but you know what? That's all we have. So what else are we supposed to do? You can do without it if you like. At the very least, they give you a profile of what's happening in the atmosphere. Like anything, you have to figure it out. That's what the game is. You're not going to get certain. You're not going to get certainty until you get really, really inside the short range, and we're just not there yet. So in the meantime, you can just look at what the profile of the atmosphere is forecast to be, and a meteorologist tries to use his expertise and use his kind of library that he has in his brain of what's happened to storms in the past in similar situations, and you sort of figure it out. It's like a gigantic math puzzle, but that's the way it goes. As for Florence, although the odds at this point are low, do you think the storm may come close to the eastern seaboard or at least Bermuda? I've never always. I gotta say, Christopher, I've never really always been comfortable with the concept of odds. They work in horse racing because you actually can the odds are you can calculate the odds based on how much money is bet on each horse. With weather, it's a bit different because of all the basic uncertainty, and the uncertainty is compounded by the fact that you've got. That being said, I would think that a close pass to Bermuda is certainly possible, regardless of whether it turns or not. I mean, it could make a pass if it's moving further west. It could pass south of Bermuda, reasonably close. It could pass just to the east of Bermuda. It might even go just west of Bermuda. I don't know the answer to that question because at the until we resolve the chess pieces, until we know where exactly the chess pieces are going to be with respect to the trough in southeastern Canada, the ridge in the Atlantic, Florence in itself is also the issue with Florence. Are we good? I want to go back to this. We talked about this yesterday. Are we going to see the are we going to see there's shear going on out along 60 West that extends eastward? It will likely weaken Florence somewhat. Does that then create a scenario where the tropical storm tracks further west because as a weakened system, it'll respond more to what's going on in the lower layers of the atmosphere with respect to steering versus the upper layers of the atmosphere? So I think that's a big question. All along, the GFS has been suggesting that we would have a stronger hurricane where it responds to the upper steering and it turns, but the overnight mid-cycle run kind of threw a curveball into that idea. I did just notice that the video froze, so you know what? I think we'll wrap it up. I don't know what the issue is. I'm going to see if I can unfreeze it, and I don't think I can. So look, let me see if I can move something. I'll see if I can bring a map up at least instead of looking at my my mug. All right. Let's get everything moving. I'm going to try and let me turn a couple of things off. Oftentimes, if there's too much happening, all right, you're now seeing stuff moving. Okay. Hang on. All right, you can at least see maps moving, so that's a good sign. I'm just trying to see if I can. What happens if we bring my? Nope, I'm still frozen. Okay, so you know what? I'll put the loop up. We'll put the loop up of Gordon, and you guys can look at that. And let me just wrap up my thought, and then we'll say goodbye. So what I was saying was that with respect to Florence, we saw how the models were showing, the GFS in particular, showing a stronger tropical storm hurricane getting caught in the upper flow, and then the overnight models kind of threw a curveball into that idea because it builds such a strong ridge off the Atlantic seaboard. Until we get those resolved, that is, we're not going to be able to really lay odds. And thanks for guys for letting me know. Really appreciate it. And Dave R, I'm glad I got to answer your question. And thanks for letting me know that I had, you guys, thanks for letting me know that there was an issue going on. Israel, no, they don't always respond to the upper level. If you've got a weak system, it shall. Remember, hurricanes are reverse of what cold core storms are. Tropical systems are stronger in their circulations as you go down closer to the ground, and they're weaker as you go up. So if you've got a system that is on the weak side, it's going to respond to the steering flow in the lower levels of the atmosphere, which oftentimes can conflict with the steering that's in the upper atmosphere. When you get situations like that, you could wind up with a system getting sheared apart. That is what winds up happening sometimes when you get these systems that get sheared. So yeah, there are there can be conflicting winds going on with respect to the upper atmosphere, and when you have an intense hurricane, it's more than likely going to get its push from the higher levels because it's a deeper system. The column of the system is stronger and goes much further up. So that's one of the reasons why that with Florence, the depth of the system is going to be important because of the conflicting steering currents that might be around at the low levels, where the high is the Bermuda Azores high is going to be has a stronger reflection compared to what we're seeing in the upper levels. All right, folks, I'm going to leave it here because I can't go to the chat board and put up the picture at the same time. I guess I spoke too soon with regards to having trouble with the live stream today, but at least you're hearing my voice, and that's a good thing. Okay, so just to let you know, I have created a site on Patreon where I'm putting all my website posts there. You'll get a web-free experience. I'm sorry, an ad-free experience versus my website, which is meteorologistjoecioffi.com. I'm giving folks the option as a way on Patreon. You can contribute if you'd like. I'm asking, I have some tiers there, a couple of bucks a month to be able to keep things going because all of the stuff I do does cost money and I do have to eat. And anyway, I put it out there. I'm not going to go to a subscription setup for either my website or for my YouTube videos. I'm going to continue to do my YouTube videos, although I will do some private videos for Patreon members once I get a few more members into the mix. So just want to let you know about that. And if you are interested, I'll put the link up here on the chat board. And of course, one other way that you can support is to use the Amazon links and the eBay links and do your web shopping on those links. And if you do, you get your stuff, and Amazon throws me back some coin. You can find the link, by the way. It's on the descriptor to the live stream and on the descriptor to this video. I put up the Patreon link there. Thank you for those of you who have had Super Chat along the way from time to time. I really appreciate that. Now here's the schedule for later today. We'll probably live stream again tonight. My usual time is 6 o'clock. I'm going to try and hit that 6 o'clock time frame. Sometimes I can and sometimes I can't. But if I wind up having to do it later, you'll notice I'll put up a scheduled time on the on my YouTube channel here. The Joe and Joe Weather Show will be on Facebook tonight at 9:15, and it will be uploaded to Patreon and to YouTube later on tonight. Sometimes I can get it up there by 10 o'clock Eastern, and other times I can't until about midnight. So just bear that in mind. Watch for it. It'll come up when it comes up. Last night's show is up there. That's the Joe and Joe Weather Show with my colleague Joe Rayo and myself. All right, folks, have a great day. Once again, just a reminder, if you watch this on the replay, everything is dated. This was done between 9:15 and 10 a.m. This morning Eastern Time. So be sure to check the Hurricane Center, nhc.noaa.gov, or your local National Weather Service office for the latest information regarding Tropical Storm Gordon and its impacts. Go to your local officials or go to your local National Weather Service office. You can access that by going to weather.gov. Not weather.com, weather.gov. Have a great day, folks. We'll talk to you later.